Sexual Personae by Camille Paglia. Chapter 1, page 23. Sex and Violence, or Nature and Art. Everything sacred and inviolable provokes profanation and violation. Every crime that can be committed will be. Rape is a mode of natural aggression that can be controlled only by the social contract. Modern feminism's most naive formulation is its assertion that rape is a crime of violence but not of sex, that it is merely power masquerading as sex, but sex is power. And all power is inherently aggressive. Rape is male power fighting female power. It is no more to be excused than is murder or any other assault on another's civil rights. Society is woman's protection against rape, not, as some feminists absurdly maintain, the cause of rape. Rape is the sexual expression of the will to power, which nature plants in all of us and which civilization rose to contain. Therefore, the rapist is a man with too little socialization, rather than too much. Worldwide evidence is overwhelming that whenever social controls are weakened, as in war or mob rule, even civilized men behave in uncivilized ways, among which is the barbarity of rape. The latent metaphors of the body guarantee the survival of rape, which is a development in degree of intensity alone of the basic movements of sex. A girl's loss of virginity is always in some sense a violation of sanctity, an invasion of her integrity and identity. Defloration is destruction, but nature creates by violence and destruction. The commonest violence in the world is childbirth, with its appalling pain and gore. Nature gives males infusions of hormones for dominance in order to hurl them against the paralyzing mystery of woman, from whom they would otherwise shrink. Her power as mistress of birth is already too extreme. Lust and aggression are fused in male hormones. Anyone who doubts this has probably never spent much time around horses. Stallions are so dangerous they must be caged in barred stalls. Once gelded, they are docile enough to serve as children's mounts. The hormonal disparity in humans is not so gross, but it is grosser than Rousseauists like to think. The more testosterone, the more elevated the libido. The more dominant the male, the more frequent his contributions to the genetic pool. Even on the microscopic level, male fertility is a function not only of number of sperm, but of their motility, that is, their restless movement, which increases the chance of conception. Sperm are miniature assault troops, and the ovum is a solitary citadel that must be breached. Weak or passive sperm just sit there, like dead ducks. Nature rewards energy and aggression. Profanation and violation are part of the perversity of sex, which never will conform to liberal theories of benevolence. Every model of morally or politically correct sexual behavior will be subverted by nature's demonic law. Every hour of every day, some horror is being committed somewhere. Feminism, arguing from the milder woman's view, completely misses the bloodlust in rape, the joy of violation and destruction. And aesthetics and erotics of profanation, evil for the sake of evil, the sharpening of the senses by cruelty and torture, have been documented in Sade, Baudelaire, and Huysmans. Women may be less prone to such fantasies because they physically lack the equipment for sexual violence. They do not know the temptation. of forcibly invading the sanctuary of another body. Our knowledge of these fantasies is expanded by pornography, which is why pornography should be tolerated, though its public display may reasonably be restricted. The imagination cannot and must not be policed. Pornography shows us nature's demonic heart, those eternal forces at work beneath and beyond social convention. Pornography cannot be separated from art. The two interpenetrate each other, far more than humanistic criticism has admitted. Jeffrey Hartman rightly says, great art is always flanked by its dark sisters, blasphemy and pornography. Hamlet itself, the cardinal Western work, is full of lewdness. Criminals throughout history, from Nero and Caligula to Gilles de Rais and the Nazi commandants, have never needed pornography to stimulate their exquisite, gruesome inventiveness. The diabolic human mind is quite enough. Happy are those periods when marriage and religion are strong. System and order shelter us against sex and nature. Unfortunately, we live in a time when the chaos of sex has broken into the open. G. Wilson Knight remarks, Christianity came originally as a tearing down of taboos in the name of a sacred humanity, but the church it gave rise to has never yet succeeded in Christianizing the pagan evil magic of sex. Historiography's most glaring error has been its assertion that Judeo-Christianity defeated paganism. Paganism has survived in the 1,000 forms of sex, art, and now the modern media. Christianity has made adjustment after adjustment, ingeniously absorbing its opposition, as during the Italian Renaissance, and diluting its dogma to change with changing times. But a critical point has been reached. With the rebirth of the gods and the massive idolatries of popular culture, with the eruption of sex and violence in every corner of the ubiquitous mass media, Judeo-Christianity is facing its most serious challenge since Europe's confrontation with Islam in the Middle Ages. The latent paganism of Western culture has burst forth again in all its demonic vitality. Paganism never was the unbridled sexual licentiousness portrayed by missionaries of the young, embattled Christianity. Singling out as typical of paganism the orgies of bored late Roman aristocrats would be as unfair as singling out as typical of Christianity the sins of renegade priests, or the Vatican revels of Pope Alexander VI. True orgy was a ceremony of the Chthonian mother cults, in which there were both sex and bloodshed. Paganism recognized, honored, and feared nature's daemonism and its limited sexual expression by ritual formulae. Christianity was a development of Dionysian mystery religion, which paradoxically tried to suppress nature in favor of a transcendental other world. The sole contact with nature that Christianity permitted its followers was sex sanctified by marriage. Chthonian nature, embodied in great goddess figures, was Christianity's most formidable opponent. Christianity works best when revered institutions like monasticism or universal marriage channel sexual energy in positive directions. Western civilization has profited enormously from the sublimation Christianity forced on sex. Christianity works least when sex is constantly stimulated from other directions, as it is now. No transcendental religion can compete with the spectacular pagan nearness and concreteness of the carnal red media. Our eyes and ears are drowned in a sensual torrent. The The pagan ritual identity of sex and violence is mass media's chief check to the complacent Rousseauisms of modern humanists. The commercial media, responding directly to popular patronage, sidestep the liberal censors who have enjoyed such long control over book culture. In film, popular music, and commercials, we contemplate all the demonic myths and sexual stereotypes of paganism that reform movements from Christianity to feminism have never been able to eradicate. The sexes are eternally at war. There is an element of attack, of search and destroy in male sex, in which there will always be a potential for rape. There is an element of entrapment in female sex, a subliminal manipulation leading to physical and emotional infantilization of the male. Freud notes, apropos of his theory of the primal scene, that a child, overhearing his parents having sex, thinks male is wounding female, and that the woman's cries of pleasure are cries of pain. Most men merely grunt, at best. But woman's strange sexual cries come directly from the Chthonian. She is a maenad about to rend her victim. Sex is an uncanny moment of ritual and incantation, in which we hear woman's barbaric ululation of triumph of the will. One domination dissolves into another. The dominated becomes the dominator. Every menstruating or childbearing woman is a pagan and primitive cast back to those distant ocean shores from which we have never fully evolved. On the streets of every city, prostitutes, the world's oldest profession, stand as a rebuke to sexual morality. They are the demonic face of nature, initiates of pagan mysteries. Prostitution is not just a service industry, mopping up the overflow of male demand, which always exceeds female supply. Prostitution testifies to the amoral power struggle of sex, which religion has never been able to stop. Prostitutes, pornographers, and their patrons are marauders in the forest of archaic night. That nature acts upon the sexes differently is proved by the test case of modern male and female homosexuality, illustrating how the sexes function separately, outside social convention. The result, according to statistics of sexual frequency, male satyriasis and female nesting. The male homosexual has sex more often than his heterosexual counterpart. The female homosexual less often than hers. A radical polarization of the sexes along a single continuum of shared sexual nonconformity. Male aggression and lust are the energizing factors in culture. They are men's tools of survival in the pagan vastness of female nature. The old double standard gave men a sexual liberty denied to women. Marxist feminists reduced the historical cult of woman's virginity to her property value, her worth on the male marriage market. I would argue instead that there was and is a biologic basis to the double standard. The first medical reports on the disease killing male homosexuals indicated men most at risk were those with 1,000 partners over their lifetime. Incredulity. Who could such people be? Why, it turned out everyone knew. Serious, kind, literate men, not bums or thugs. What an abyss divides the sexes. Let us abandon the pretense of sexual sameness and admit the terrible duality of gender. Male sex is quest romance, exploration, and speculation. Promiscuity in men may cheapen love but sharpen thought. Promiscuity in women is illness, a leakage of identity. The promiscuous woman is self-contaminated and incapable of clear ideas. She has ruptured the ritual integrity of her body. It is in nature's best interests to goad dominant males into indiscriminate spreading of their seed, but nature also profits from female purity. Even in the liberated or lesbian woman, there is some biologic restraint whispering, "Keep the birth canal clean." In judiciously withholding herself, woman protects an invisible fetus. Perhaps this is the reason for the archetypal horror, rather than socialized fear, that many otherwise bold women have of spiders and other rapidly crawling insects. Women hold themselves in reserve because the female body is a reservoir, a virgin patch of still, pooled water, where the fetus comes to term. Male chase and female flight are not just a social game. The double standard may be one of nature's organic laws. The quest romance of male sex is a war between identity and annihilation. An erection is a hope for objectivity, for power to act as a free agent. But at the climax of his success, woman is pulling the male back to her bosom, drinking and quelling his energy. Freud says, man fears that his strength will be taken from him by woman, dreads become infected with her femininity, and then proving himself a weakling. Masculinity must fight off effeminacy day by day. Woman and nature stand ever ready to reduce the male to boy and infant. The operations of sex are convulsive, from intercourse through menstruation and childbirth, tension and distension, spasm, contraction, expulsion, relief. The body is wrenched in serpentine swelling and slowing. Sex is not the pleasure principle, but the Dionysian bondage of pleasure-pain. So much as a matter of overcoming resistance in the body or the beloved, that rape will always be a present danger. Male sex is repetition compulsion. Whatever a man writes in the commentary of his phallic projections must be rewritten again and again. Sexual man is the magician, sawing the lady in half. Yet the serpent head and tail always live and rejoin. Projection is a male curse. Forever to need something or someone to make oneself complete. This is one of the sources of art, and the secret of its historical domination by males. The artist is the closest man has come to imitating woman's superb self-containment. But the artist needs his art, his projection. The blocked artist, like Leonardo, suffers tortures of the damned. The most famous painting in the world, the Mona Lisa, records woman's self-satisfied apartness, her ambiguous mocking smile, at the vanity and despair of her many sons. Everything great in Western culture has come from the quarrel with nature. The West, and not the East, has seen the frightful brutality of natural process, the insult to mind in the heavy blind rolling and milling of matter. In loss of self we would not find love or God, but primeval squalor. This revelation has historically fallen upon the Western male, who is pulled by tidal rhythms back to the oceanic mother. It is to his resentment of this demonic undertow that we owe the grand constructions of our culture. Apollonianism, cold and absolute, is the West's sublime refusal. The Apollonian is a male line drawn against the dehumanizing magnitude of female nature. Everything is melting in nature. We think we see objects, but our eyes are slow and partial. Nature is blooming and withering in long, puffy respirations, rising and falling in oceanic wave motion. A mind that opened itself fully to nature, without sentimental preconception, would be glutted by nature's coarse materialism, its relentless superfluity. An apple tree laden with fruit. How peaceful, how picturesque. But remove the rosy filter of humanism from our gaze and look again. See nature spuming and frothing, its mad spermatic bubbles endlessly spilling out and smashing in that inhuman round of waste, rot, and carnage. From the jammed glassy cells of Cero to the feathery spores poured into the air from bursting green pods, nature is a festering hornet's nest of aggression and overkill. This is the Chthonian black magic with which we are infected as sexual beings. This is the daemonic identity that Christianity so inadequately defines as original sin, and thinks it can cleanse us of. Procreative woman is the most troublesome obstacle to Christianity's claim to Catholicity, testified by its wishful doctrines of immaculate conception and virgin birth. The procreativeness of Chthonian nature is an obstacle to all of Western metaphysics, and to each man in his quest for identity against his mother. Nature is the seething excess of being.